Welcome everybody for joining us, the American Jewish Congress. My name is Joel Rubin. I'm the Executive Director of the Congress, and we are thrilled to have you here joining us and our special guest, Acting Consul General to New York from Israel Nitzan. And a little bit more about the Congress just before we get going, which is we are a foundation legacy organization of the Jewish community. We are deeply passionate about defending Jewish rights and interests, both at home and abroad. We've been focusing extensively in recent months, in particular on white supremacy and countering domestic terrorism. We have a long-standing history of fighting for civil rights and justice here at home, and of course, defending and protecting the state of Israel and advancing every effort we can to help Israel secure peace. So with that as the segue, the enjoinder to get us into the segue that is of our special guests. The moment is tense right now in Israel, and we're very fortunate to have Consul General Nitzan speak with us. We will have an open conversation, and then we'll invite people to as well put in questions into the Q&A chat at the appropriate time. I want to introduce Israel, who has been here since 2018 at the consulate. He's a longtime diplomat from the state of Israel. He has served in many senior posts. He's served as well as a leader in the political affairs department back in Israel. He was a deputy chief of mission in Cairo, spokesperson as well. Israel and I have some overlapping professional backgrounds. I was a deputy assistant secretary of state and was on the Egypt desk for a number of years at the State Department as well, serving in the Bush administration and as an appointee in the Obama administration. So hopefully we can get into some of the nuts and bolts of what's really going on the ground. And that's why we're holding today's discussion. We want to understand what is taking place. There's been a lot of tension in Israel and in the West Bank and Gaza since mid-April. There have been tensions in Jerusalem, and it really exploded over the past week or so into violence in Jerusalem, and now the nightmarish violence of rockets being sent from Gaza by Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad militants and terrorists into Israel and terrorizing the civilian population there, both Arabs and Jews. So I wanted to first allow Israel to share with us your perspective on where things are, and then maybe we'll get into some back and forth questions and have a good dialogue.
Sure. First of all, Joel, and all our friends in the American Jewish Congress, thank you so much for your support, your friendship, and actually for organizing this virtual briefing and for inviting me, and our personal friendship, of course. I will open by saying, Israel is under attack. Terrorists in Gaza, led by Hamas, a terrorist organization designated by the United States, have launched a wave of terrorism against Israel. It began there was a buildup with Palestinian and especially Hamas incitement to violence in recent weeks, leading all the way to Monday, in which with confrontations in Jerusalem, and eventually leading to Hamas shooting at Israeli communities. Actually, the opening, let's say, the first launching of a major barrage of rockets was actually aimed at Jerusalem. Hamas presenting itself or pretending to speak on behalf of Jerusalem and as the guardians of the holy sites, and Jerusalem actually attacked Jerusalem with 7 rockets. And Israel, and in addition to, of course, a very heavy shooting at our civilians, at our communities. By now, after 4 days into this conflict, we've had already 2,000 rockets shot at our communities, again, targeting Israeli civilians. More than 1 million Israeli civilians live today under the direct threat of rocket fire. We have 8 Israeli civilians who were killed, including children, by direct hits of Hamas rockets. plus including one Indian national who was killed in Ashkelon, directed at our apartment, and an IDF officer that was who was killed by a shooting of an anti-tank, Russian anti-tank missile that was actually smuggled, as we understand, was smuggled, supplied by Iran to Hamas. So I'll add two more things about the victims and the casualties. You know, the Hamas rockets do not show no prejudice, and in the last 4 days, you know, we've had the last victim was actually a 5-year-old child from Sderot, Ido Avigal, who was killed by a direct hit. A father, an Arab-Israeli father and daughter, Khalil and Nadine Awad, were killed due to a direct hit in Lod, in addition to this Indian citizen, Sumaya Santush, who was killed in Ashkelon. So they differentiate, they shoot indiscriminately, targeting both Jews, non-Jews, but they're also targeting Palestinians. They're not targeting Palestinians, but about 30% of the rockets shot at Israel failed to cross the fence and fall in Palestinian territory, in Gaza, and basically, and not only endangering Palestinian lives, but we know that there are casualties and actually people who were killed due to these failed shootings by Hamas.
So thank you, Israel, for sharing that. And we'll focus a little bit initially on these sort of military and humanitarian questions and then segue into the diplomatic ones. But I wanted to get your take then. I mean, why do you think, what's your assessment as to why the rockets were shot right now? Obviously, the tensions were there before in Jerusalem, but why were the rockets used as a tool by Hamas at this moment in time?
Hamas is a terrorist organization, first of all. So they aim and they shoot rockets. They have this. They control the Gaza Strip since 2015. Hamas believes that they can. They were trying to take advantage of a very what some people call the perfect storm, which is Monday, May 10th. Monday, May 10th was actually one of the last days of the holy month of Ramadan. So Hamas, during weeks of incitement to violence, heightened the tension, and they created a situation in which they were trying to put Jerusalem as their goal of protection, and urging Palestinians, both on the Temple Mount and elsewhere, a riot and attack the Israeli security forces. I'm talking mainly about the Israeli police. They try to take advantage of the situation in order to gain some political gains in the West Bank and in Jerusalem. They believe that Mahmoud Abbas is weak, and they are trying basically to weaken Abbas even further. They know that they are basically limited in their physical presence in the Gaza Strip. So they try to use this violence in order to gain some political gains, both in Jerusalem and in the West Bank.
So knowing that and taking that into account as an assessment for the Israeli government, the IDF, how does that factor into the question of the engagement in Gaza and protection of civilians and ensuring that the kinds of operations that the IDF is undertaking are done bearing those political factors in mind as well as the humanitarian ones?
I need to say that this operation, we call it the Guardians of the Walls. In Hebrew, it sounds better. The Guardians of the Walls is aimed at Hamas military capabilities. The Palestinians are not the innocent civilians are not our enemy and are not our target to this military campaign that is focused at actually weakening Hamas and not allowing Hamas to have any political gains out of this act of provocation. Secondly, and again, targeting our communities indiscriminately. The IDF is targeting, again, military facilities of Hamas, its headquarters, its weapon depots, and especially the rocket manufacturing facilities, including, by the way, also at some tech tunnels that two of them were targeted during the last few days. We have no intention of targeting, and we're doing whatever we can in order to avoid hitting or harming civilian lives. I can tell you that there are certain two technical means that are being used is what we call the knock on the roof, which is a tiny bomb that is thrown at the roof, making a lot of noise so people know that, but no damage. And people know that they should and they must leave the structure, the building in order not to be harmed. One, two, people actually receive phone calls from the IDF, both to their residents and both to their cell phones, warning them that they need to leave a certain place because there are terrorist headquarters in it and they're going to be targeted. If we know that there are civilians in these buildings, then the target will not be attacked. And we do whatever we can in order to avoid any attack against civilians.
Thank you for sharing that, Israel. And maybe going on to the other side of it, and the Israeli civilians in Iron Dome in particular, there have been a lot of visuals shared on social media about Iron Dome and rates given about numbers of hits and success. Can you speak to that a little bit and what that means for the psychology of Israeli civilians and for the way that Israelis are viewing this moment and how the Iron Dome factors into the conditions for Israelis on the ground?
I think that we can all see the statements on social media. Thank you, Iron Dome, for protecting us by Israelis. Iron Dome is doing an exceptional, really exceptional work in Israel. I won't mention the exact percentage of the interception here, but it is actually the percentage of this interception is very, very, very high. And the Iron Dome is working phenomenally in Israel. I have to say one thing, that the Iron Dome, the goal of the Iron Dome is first of all to save lives. It's clear, but it also allows us, actually the Iron Dome is also a stabilizing factor in such a situation, because actually it allows us, by minimizing the civilian casualties on the Israeli side, it allows Israel to contain the escalation and to prevent, let's say, not to be dragged into a wider military campaign due to, let's say, higher numbers of casualties on the Israeli side. So Iron Dome is a critical factor in stabilizing the situation. I should say that we thank, of course, the United States and the US administration, prior and current, previous and current, and also the US Congress, of course, for their support and their commitment to this project that, again, saves lives, but also allows us to contain the situation and not to be dragged into into a wider campaign against the Gaza Strip.
Before I go to another question, one follow-up on that. From an Israeli perspective, are there greater needs for Iron Dome in Israel beyond what we've seen in terms of technology transfer and quantities of supply?
I think that our cooperation with the United States is excellent, and we're grateful for the United States and the U.S. Congress for everything that they're doing. We have a direct dialogue with the relevant agencies in DC about these issues, but I think that, again, I think that the Iron Dome is critical, and it's so important, especially at this stage. The exceptional, the phenomenal interception rate just proves that how wonderful this system is.
So with that in mind, and thank you for touching on some of the political and the engagement with the US questions, and in your experience, you served at the United Nations, you served in the Arab world, obviously have held senior posts in very critical, sensitive moments. And I wanted to get your take on the regional diplomacy that is underway, that you can share with us about Israel, who Israel is engaging with as a country, obviously, but you as a person as well, if you're willing to share. And then also how the dynamics go in terms of working with the United States and sort of having others in the region step into this situation to try to calm it down.
Well, first of all, our first partner, first ally is the United States, and the main dialogue and the most meaningful dialogue is done with the U.S. administration and U.S. Congress and all our friends and allies here in the United States. Naturally, Egypt is another partner for such a conversation about the Gaza Strip because they share the border with Gaza, because of their historic role in the Gaza Strip, and also because of the importance that we attach to our relationship and our peace with Egypt. I think that the message that right now what we need is to allow us to basically weaken Hamas and make sure that Hamas cannot go out of this conflict with any, let's say, possible upper hand. We want Hamas to be we want Hamas's capabilities to be reduced by the IDF, of course, to the minimal power possible. So we have a dialogue with both with Egypt and other regional partners on the situation. What we need right now, the time is for the IDF to operate and to target the Hamas military capabilities in order to eliminate this threat. We will continue the dialogue with our regional partners, of course, with Egypt as well as with other countries. I would like maybe to say one more thing. This has been a very 2020 was a difficult year because of the pandemic, but it was also an important year because of the Abraham Accords. So we have new partners actually in the region. Israel signed the Abraham Accords with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. This process has led already for also Sudan and Morocco to join our camp of peace, in which we also have Egypt and Jordan. And we believe that this is a regional process. And we believe that this is the first step for a regional process. So we call on our Palestinian friends, Palestinian neighbors, to join this process and to re-engage in a process of dialogue with Israel. Part of it needs to also to address the problem of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Part of it also needs to address the problem of incitement to violence. That this is what we're seeing these days is the outcome of this tension that was built up by Hamas through social media, through other means of media, inciting to violence, heightening the emotions, and eventually leading to this round of violence.
So you touched on the Palestinian side. So I think maybe this is a proper segue as well to ask about the Palestinian Authority and engagements with the PA and President Abbas, and some of the dynamics there clearly between the PA and Hamas are very negative. So could you share your thoughts on what way forward for Israel with the Palestinian Authority, and what expectations are there regarding this moment, and what communications do you think are helpful to keep that part of the equation as part of the solution?
Well, first of all, there is a dialogue. There is a daily ongoing dialogue on basically with the Palestinian Authority on the different aspects of let's say managing their ability to manage the lives of the Palestinians on the ground in the West Bank under their control. It is done through the IDF, through COGAT, and through other means. Of course, there are other channels of dialogue in certain ways with the Palestinian leadership. But we need to say again that, if seeing and following the recent weeks, again, leading to this round of conflict, what we could see is that basically Hamas was pushing through incitement to violence, and the Palestinian Authority was actually joining these messages urging the Palestinians to riot and to act in a violent and destabilizing manner. So I think that in many ways, the Palestinian Authority should also, again, stop the incitement, re-engage in a peaceful manner with Israel. But I think that, again, our goal is, and our perception is, that we now have a regional process that actually puts the interests of the peoples first. This is what is so extraordinary in the Abraham Accords, that we put the interests of our peoples, the well-being of our people first, both in the UAE, both in Bahrain and in Israel. And we believe that when the Palestinian Authority chooses to put their well-being and the interest of the Palestinian people first, we will achieve peace.
Thank you, Israel. Thank you for that. And so people are now putting some questions into the chat, and one of them, which I think is a very pressing question for everybody watching the news and watching the stories, and for those of us who have been fortunate to have spent time in Israel to see the moment now of communal, a bit of communal violence. I'll put it that way, and the tensions between the Palestinian Israeli and Jewish Israeli communities, which is very heart-wrenching personally, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that and what's being done in that space by the government.
Well, first of all, it is heart-wrenching. It is heartbreaking to see these images coming from Israel. It is a difficult moment, both in the context of the conflict with Hamas and the attacks on our civilians, but also in this tension and sometimes violent expressions or attacks between the communities. I should say two things. One, well, listen, Israel is a democracy, and I think that you know very well. Israel is a very diverse society, in which, in many cases, you have tensions between different communities. Nothing can justify violence, and we condemn the violence in the hardest and the most clear terms. Both the Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Rivlin went out publicly yesterday, calling on all sides to first of all condemning the violence and condemning these behaviors, and secondly calling on all sides to calm down and to bring back sanity to some of the streets and some of the communities. I have to say that but we should also be, while I do not underestimate the situation or the severity of these incidents, I want to say that, and I think that you know very well, this is a minority. It's a very vocal and very aggressive and sometimes violent minority on both sides that does not represent the views of the majority of the people in Israel, who do believe in coexistence, who do believe in our shared future together. The government has invested quite a lot in several billions of dollars in the last 5 years in minimizing the gaps between Arab communities and Jewish communities in different areas, both in encouraging and empowering younger, let's say, members of the Arab community to go and to join the academia and to have university, to go to university studies. We have much higher percentages of Arabs within the Israeli universities today, especially Arab women, by the way. It is all done through an understanding that there is a need to bridge these gaps. I'm not saying that everything is perfect, but I'm saying that at least the government, and I think that the majority of the public, believes that this is what should be done.
Thank you for sharing that. And along those lines, there are questions coming in about how this is being perceived, or how Israel is being perceived now as a result of everything that you've just described and discussed. And I know we have 3 or 4 more minutes. I wanted to sneak in one more question after this, but ask for your thoughts on how it's being covered, how you think the perception is of this conflict from your perspective, and what do you think the opinions are in the media space, in the social media space in particular, and just share your thoughts with us about that.
Well, I think that I want to remind us all that this is an asymmetric conflict, military conflict between a sovereign state and a terror organization. A sovereign state that is fully and totally committed to the international law, and trying to prevent and to minimize as much as possible harming civilians on the other side, and actually to protect the civilians on the other side, while we fight against a terror organization that has no rules, no red lines, and shooting more than 2,000 rockets at our civilians. So this is the context of things. Sometimes people miss, and I think that there is a problem. There is a problem of moral clarity. There is a problem that we simply cannot accept a situation in which there is a moral equivalence between what Israel is doing and what Hamas is doing. There should be a more clear, a more clarity in this sense. I think that we should, again, with social media, listen, social media, you will have those who are very vocal, and you have those who support Israel and believe that Israel is right, and Israel has the right to defend itself, and Israel is right is acting in the most humane and most, let's say, again, trying to minimize as much as we can to prevent as much as we can casualties and harm to Palestinian civilians on the other side. So haters will hate. We need to fight it very aggressively on social media. We're doing it also on the traditional media by going online, by giving interviews and briefings about the situation. I think that we morally we have the higher ground, and we will continue to act in a very moral way. What we believe that what we would like, at least what we urge our friends to do today, is to unequivocally condemn Hamas for what they're doing, for shooting rockets against our civilians, by recognizing our right to defend ourselves. And again, I go back to the point of incitement. We need to address this problem of incitement to terrorism and to violence that was actually the trigger and led and created this buildup leading to this recent round of conflict between Israel and Hamas.
Thanks, Israel. One last tiny question before we close. Simple question. What more would you like to see from the United States at this moment?
The United States, the United States is our first and main ally and partner. The United States and Israel share this is not only a strategic alliance. These are very special relations that we share with the United States. We share values with the United States of democracy, of commitment to human lives. What I told you earlier, we need the United States to stand by Israel right now to address this problem of the Hamas military buildup, of Hamas choosing to invest its resources in creating rockets instead of using the tubes for the water infrastructure in the Gaza Strip, and for using cement in the Gaza Strip for tunnels instead of building schools. This is the real priority right now, to address the military threat by Hamas. The next step is to address the problem that Hamas is posing also politically from the Gaza Strip, to address the problem of incitement, and we do need your support. And we appreciate all expressions of support and sympathy and solidarity that we receive from the many elected officials, members of the U.S. Congress, and other elected officials in the United States. I know that you're with us, and we know that you're with us. And the people, 1 million people right now in shelter in Israel, they know that the United States is standing up with Israel in this very difficult moment, and we appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you, Israel. We're proud to stand with Israel at this moment. It's also a propitious day. It's May 14th. So in the Gregorian calendar, it's the 73rd anniversary of the founding of the State of Israel.
Happy birthday, Israel.
Happy birthday, Israel. And for everybody watching today, thank you for joining. Our website is ajcongress.org. We invite you to check us out and to get involved and participate. And to Acting Consul General Israel Nitzan, thank you for taking the time on an incredibly busy day. And we wish you all the best and safety and peace in the coming days.
Thank you again, Joel. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you.